Welcome everyone to Leading in the Digital Era. I'm Robert Field, and today we're going to talk about one of the biggest shifts in our profession: the CIO moving from IT leader to a true enterprise leader. This conversation is about what changes the CIO is no longer measured by technology delivery, but by business outcomes, growth, profitability, customer experience, operations, and culture. We all look how architecture platforms choices shape enterprise value, how to lead when authority is shared, and why culture, not tools, determines whether the transformation succeeds. If you want clear language, stronger leadership moves with a sharper lens on what drives real change, you're in the right place. Today's panel is a personal one. It's easy to have three professionals join that are smart, experienced, and I call family. And what I love about these three leaders who don't just treat technology as a story, they treat it as a lever. So I'd like to first bring to the screen today a very good friend, Phil Dundas. Phil is the Chief Technology Officer at Alti Global, the world's largest independent wealth management firm. Phil's the kind of leader who brings calm to complexity. He has a career spanning 3 decades in technology leadership across US and Australia, with more than 2 decades in financial services. His background includes senior roles with big companies like Prudential Global Investment Management, Schroders Investment Firm, Mark Queer, I've messed it up, Phil, every time, sorry, Mizuho, and others. He's led global technology initiatives spanning software, data engineering, and artificial intelligence, business intelligence, product management, cybersecurity, DevOps, and infrastructure. He holds an MBA from Northwestern University Kellogg School of Management, a Master's of Commerce in Information Technology Management from the University of New South Wales, and a Bachelor of Applied Science in Computing from Southern Cross University in Australia. While he still owes me a can of Vegemite, he's one of these people that when he calls, you want to answer in the hopes of spending time together. Welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Rob. Great to be here. And it's Macquarie.
Macquarie, thank you. I messed that up last time we did this too. Well, we're going to welcome another family member, Ryan Crosby. Ryan's an enterprise transformation leader focused on turning strategy into execution. What I love about Ryan is he thinks in terms of operating model, not just technology. He's led platform modernizations from operating model changes in complex regulated organizations, partnering with CEOs to improve enterprise speed at risk management. A 3-time CIO 100 award winner, and his perspective centers on technology is a lever for business performance, not an end in itself. He's always making sure everyone around him is taken care of, and his thoughtfulness extends further than anybody else's reach. Ryan, welcome.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. Hello, Phil.
And rounding out our panel, Vikram Nair. Vikram's a global CEO of Amneal Pharmaceuticals. They're a $3 billion global pharmaceutical company, which he's led the tripling of its digital footprint over the last 6 years. Vikram is a definition of what a modern enterprise CEO would look like. He spearheads enterprise-wide transformations with ERP, AI, and data platforms. Before this, he held senior IT leadership roles at industry leaders like Viking Cruises, Carnival Corporation, Pfizer, and prior to that, he was an IT strategy organization consultant at McKinsey & Company. Vikram is one of the most humble, caring people I know. I find it hard-pressed to ever remember an event we've been to where Vikram's not trying to capture every moment, reminding us just how much of a family we are. So, welcome to my family.
Thank you, Rob. Great to be here.
So I'm going to kick this off. We had a lot of fun doing this in practice, and I just hope in execution of production it goes as well. But let's start with question number 1. And Vikram, we'll start with you. What do you have to unlearn from traditional IT leadership to succeed as an enterprise leader?
Well, Rob, it's an interesting question because I don't think I ever learned to be a traditional CIO. But as I've interacted with people over the years, I think the thing that I need to keep reminding myself of is that delivering value is not the same as delivering projects, or delivering projects is not the same as delivering value. So what I've had to unlearn is that the real value comes from changing how people work. And whether it's processes, whether it's people's roles, there's always something new and different to create. And that's really where everyone's focus should go on the project or the initiative that you're working on, but particularly the CIO, because the CIO can see across many functions that other people can't.
A friend of mine once said the CIO is the API of the business. Having that accessibility across the organization is helpful in how we operate. So, Phil, same question to you.
I love the quote, the API of the business. Technology, Rob, is connected to every facet of an organization. Now, there's nothing that isn't any longer touched by everything that we do in technology leadership. And I think that Vikram nailed it when he used the word value. What what we're here to do in technology is no longer just to keep the lights on, but it's actually really drive the value of the organization and determine through spending time with the business exactly how they create value and how technology can actually support and enable them in doing that. So yeah, I would back up everything that Vikram has said.
And Phil, I've seen you do this time and time again, and we've had many conversations around it, but that is, I think, one of the quintessential things that make you a great leader. Ryan, how about you? What have you had to unlearn or adopt as a traditional IT to succeed in what we're doing as enterprise leaders now?
Yeah, of course. Look, I think, what Vikram and Phil are saying are pretty much spot on. You have to stop equating success with delivery and start owning outcomes. I think that is paramount. And, when I was at Morgan Stanley for a very long time, the biggest thing that I had to unlearn was the idea that doing my job well meant delivering what was asked of me on time, on budget, on spec. That mindset kind of keeps you safe, but it doesn't move the enterprise, to Phil's point and to Vikram's point. And I think in today's world, to succeed as an enterprise leader, you have to stop waiting for the perfect requirements and start owning results. And that's a famous quote that I love to kind of live by. Perfect is the enemy of the good, from Voltaire. It's just something that the more you wait, the longer it's going to be. But that means stepping into ambiguity, challenging, upstream decisions, which we have to do a lot, which we don't realize that you have to really push the boundaries with CEOs and CFOs to say, look, that's not the right way to handle this. But then taking accountability for outcomes, like the revenue flow, client experience and risk. And when those cross-functional lines really need to take an impact. So deliver with trust, ownership earns influence in my point of view, and driving that, properly.
Rob, can I just jump in on that too? Just bolting on what Ryan said there is that it's so key to not just focus on delivery, but I don't think that means you don't focus on delivery. It means you're building upon that. And the one thing that technology is generally pretty good at is delivery. We've got good frameworks for taking something from A to B and really, pushing a project through. And a lot of the business, at least the ones that I've worked with, that's not an area that they're always the strongest at. And they actually, look for some support in making that happen. So you asked the question around what have you had to unlearn? I don't know that I'd say I've unlearned things, but what have you actually really had to expand your horizons on? I realize, and that's where you can use all of the strengths and capabilities that you've got as a executor of delivery and getting things done, but then actually really expand the framework you look in things at the way that Ryan has described, and really looking at the full facet of the way the business operates, not just the way that technology delivers stuff.
I love the expansion idea, but I also don't want to lose sight on one of the key words that Ryan used that I love, and I'm going to follow up with a second T word. It's a trust, building that trust within your organization, but you and a CIO having the confidence to be able to not only build that trust, but push back when you need to, and know that you're doing it for the right reasons. And I think that emphasis embodies what we all do every day, but it's developing that trust and ensuring that we are confident in where we're going, and you guys exude this constantly. So you have made decisions throughout this and the building upon where you're going. And, is there a technology decision that you've made that shaped business value, either positive or negatively? Can you guys share a personal story for something you've done? And I see Vikram nodding, so I'm going to go ahead on him first. But
I think there's so many decisions I've made that have had both outcomes, some positive, some not. But the thing that comes to mind actually happened recently, and it's kind of building on that theme of owning delivery versus enabling delivery. And we recently I actually made the call to stop a project. It's a multi-million-dollar project, multiple years. And, we had lots of consultants on the project, and everyone kept pointing at this one consultant that really wasn't supposedly doing their job. And we got kind of fed up, and the more I dug, the more it seemed that, maybe the consultant really wasn't helping. Got rid of the consultant. And then what we realized is actually the problem was that our team really wasn't taking ownership of doing the stuff. So they were relying on consultant A, consultant B, consultant C to kind of take them into the new without really owning it. And all they were doing was kind of nitpicking what the consultants did. And so the project just paused. and because I just refuse to restart it, we're going to lose some value in terms of, value to be gained, but we're going to gain some value because the people are going to learn to take ownership of the change that they need to drive in terms of people's roles and processes. And so we're going through that right now. And I think it's going to create a lot of value because people are going to realize where the true value comes from rather than just implementing a system.
Well, I love that example of shaping culture within your organization and ensuring that ownership starts with those who are doing the work. I love that, especially when a CIO has the opportunity to change culture and affect it. I think it's a really exciting opportunity for growth. Kudos to you for that, by the way.
Thank you.
Ryan, how about you? Any experience?
Yeah, I've had both. To Vikram and Phil, I mean, great answers. My core idea here is architecture choices create operating models. And earlier on in my career, I underestimated how much, a platform decision, building it out, could either accelerate or silently constrain the business. One example was just, standardizing, which I thought was the right thing to do too aggressively on a single platform without fully understanding how different business units actually generated that value and leveraged that platform. Technically, it worked. Operationally, it slowed decision making, reduced flexibility and income in critical areas, especially in trading. That experience taught me that architecture isn't just a technical decision. It's an operating model decision. And since then, I've, kind of evaluate technology choices by asking, does this increase throughput, output, outcomes, resilience and speed to value, or does it just, simplify IT? And, that architecture doesn't fail loudly. It taxes the business every day. And if you don't hold true to that business outcome, as my young kids would say, liar, liar, pants on fire, you have to really focus on what the business outcome is.
Nice. Look, I think, can I just build on what the guys said?
Yeah, of course.
The title of this podcast might as well be Leading Change in the Digital Era, because change is all we do all day long, have been doing for the past 20, 30, 40 years. And I think we're so lucky to be working in an industry or in a function that is got to be the fastest changing of any function ever in business, right? And being able to admit that something you went down the road path on wasn't the right and that you need to pivot, I think, Phil, you said that, is just so important. And it doesn't mean admitting you're wrong. It just means you learned from something that had never been done before and you adjusted and pivoted to something that might work better. And this is what I tell, the young people coming through as interns here is, if you see something, say something. If something doesn't seem right or seems out of pattern, it is. And so don't, and another friend of mine used to say, bad news doesn't get better with age. So better call it first, ask if other people are seeing the same thing you're seeing. And that, that builds the team spirit or confidence in changing if the change is required.
Well, so I love that, Vikram. I love the building on. We got a great question from the audience, which identifying that trend. Are there any cues that you guys look forward to pause what you're creating, right? Are there specific cues around the way the organization works, the people operate? Vikram, it was addressed to you, but I think I'd like everyone to weigh in on this.
It's a great question, actually. And I don't think there's one right answer to it. But I think how people react to the pause tells you what to do next. And if we have people who continue to say, well, I really need some extra pair of hands to do this because my current team is busy and plus it's new for them and, they're not going to, they need someone to teach them. That tells me there's no ownership there, right? And until they're going to take ownership, nothing anybody can do will help them. On the other hand, if I see people just not knowing what to do, right, then I think it just as the change agent comment we've made is it's our job to jump in and help them figure out how to do it, giving them tools, giving them tips, techniques. And in this age of AI, it's wonderful because you've got a billion brains at your fingertips. So I may not know something about whatever they're doing deeply, but I can help them learn it faster than I can.
Perfect.
I mean, I'll just add to that real quick to Vikram's point. I mean, look, I think complexity doesn't kill ideas, clarity does. And I think clarity of the outcome, and then where you start to map out the end-to-end flow of like demand to cash, and where you really put the idea in place. Because I think a lot of people fall with not understanding what part they're accountable for, what part they own, and where it actually fits within the grand scheme of the end-to-end process. And I think once you understand the flow and you have that clarity, to Vikram's point, a lot of that gets adjusted pretty quickly.
Yes, setting expectations, being clear on what people should see is going to happen through the program, I think is as clear as what's in scope and what's not in scope is as important as every other aspect of the project, and getting complete buy-in so people know what that's going to look like from the outset is really, really important. And I align exactly with what Ryan said. Clarity is everything, and that could be clarity of where we're going, like I've just said, the scope, clarity of who's owning what, what are the dates and the drivers. And so often you'll be well into a program, you'll start talking to some stakeholders, and they're like, remind me why we're doing this at all, or remind me which direction we're going. And all of a sudden, they're like, oh my gosh, if that's not clear, we really need to pause and make sure everybody is bought into it and understands exactly why we're doing this. And it may be that you've actually told people multiple times and just that person doesn't seem to have understood it or appreciated what it is. But that reinforcing why you're undertaking a program and repeatedly doing that, and obviously the progress along that is really, really important.
So not everybody can hear communication the same way, right? You have to deliver multiple messages to people
in different ways often as well.
Of course. So is there an effective move or tool or something that you guys do to align your peers who don't report to you, right? So handling things, potentially kid gloves, whatever. What type of tools have you guys used before to get alignment and adoption? So Phil, why don't you kick this one off?
I think, first of all, figuring out who those key and influential stakeholders are very early on, who are going to be your biggest supporters and who potentially could be naysayers on any initiative, and really figuring out, what's driving them, where that might be coming from, and then aligning with them. And honestly, I often find the best thing to do is take somebody out for lunch, go out for, go for a coffee, and just spend time with people, understanding what's motivating, what's driving them. It may be that somebody's, not that on board with the program because you're going to be replacing something that was something they had introduced many, many years ago. It may be that they've just got an aversion with working with some other teams or a vendor or whatever it may be. There could be any myriad of drivers behind that. Unpacking that and understanding that and genuinely listening, because there's probably some really good value in there to help you understand, whether what you're proposing actually makes sense. And I think that, one of the questions I like to ask people in an interview is, when's the last time somebody changed your mind? Somebody else changed your mind? And that's actually a really profound thing to be asked, because when somebody presents you an idea, are you willing to change your mind, or are you hell-bent on delivering your idea come what may? And I think, showing that flexibility and the tenacity to do so is actually, the willingness to do so is very, very important. But again, going back to how to get it done, it's often as simple as just spending time with people one-on-one, connecting with them at a personal level and understanding what might be motivating them one way or another.
Well, Phil, I have to tell you, butter my biscuit, because that interview question has to be on everybody's list going forward. Good. That was a good one. Thank you. Ryan,
diggity dog, Phil. You finally, we say the same thing, I would think the same way, which I thought would never happen because you're so much smarter than I am.
That was great. That was great.
I totally agree.
Said no one ever, just to be clear, Vikram.
So Vikram,
I mean, I'll just jump in because I know you kind of asked me about, like, to Phil's point. Look, I think alignment around shared outcomes, not org charts, matters. The most, effective shift is really the conversation is, it's not my function versus yours. It's what outcomes are we, jointly accountable for, and how do we drive the business, right? In matrix environments, authority is kind of limited, especially if it's a very flat organization. I found that map in the flow, looking at where the revenue is, where risk accumulates, create a neutral, fact-based way to align peers. But, when people see how their decisions really impact the enterprise results, alignment usually follows naturally, kind of what Phil was mentioning. And you don't need authority when accountability is visible, right? If we all take accountability, it should be very easy and very streamlined to get to the end result.
Vikram, any thoughts on this?
I was just going to say, that I agree with everything you guys say. At McKinsey, they used to teach everyone an introductory leadership workshop, 10 influence tactics, right? Because you would have to deal with people with different personalities and different tactics worked on different kinds of personalities. But the one thing I took away from that was that logic, while it's the most logical reasoning to use to convince someone to do something, is usually the least effective. And so depending on who you're talking to, listening, I think, as Phil said, makes a lot of sense. And then you take your cue from there. And socializing is one great way of kind of getting out of the formality of the situation and really talking and listening to each other. Another one that's, someone should always keep in the back of their minds is what's in it for them, right? Because people are kind of motivated by those incentives. And not that you have to twist the program or whatever it is you're trying to do to make it appealing to them, because they'll see right through that. But you have to be honest with yourself if what you're trying to do is actually helpful to them or not. And if you don't think about it that way, you can't highlight a potential benefit to them.
Perfect. We did get a question that landed right before, but it's very similar. Just to put out there, someone mentioned they've seen transformations where technology landed perfectly, but behaviors didn't change. There's a specific signal, leading indicator that you learn to watch for, something that tells you culture is starting to resist before it becomes as visible as a project failure opportunity. And I think it's along the lines of what we're doing, unless you guys have any final thoughts on that. But I do want to say you've ended some great takeaways. So tomorrow's reading notes on this is some good stuff people to add to their
Hey,
repertoire.
Rob, can I just add something? It might sound like malarkey to people, but I think it's pretty easy to forget that people want to be part of making the solution happen, right? So if you don't bring them into the design, the making, even setting the goal and the objective, it's harder to bring them on later. So the earlier you get people on and into it, you've probably got a much better chance of getting them on board.
And look, I just, to Vikram's point, change is disruptive, whether it's good or bad. It's still disruptive. And I think when people realize that what we're doing is helping them be better at what they're trying to achieve and understand and communicate and clarify without oversimplifying, what the needs are, they become more involved in what they're trying to do, right? Because they know it's going to help them. And that's communication, right? That's people. That's like what we don't realize is we talk about process, we talk about flow, we talk about, resiliency and outcomes and revenue generation. But what we don't talk about is the people that it takes to get there, right? And that communication is key. Talking to leaders is one thing, but talking to the people who are actually doing the work to build it, and then the people who are actually going to be leveraging that system after the fact, and that change in process that they've had done, the same thing for 5 to 10, 15 years, to Phil's point earlier. How do you change that, right? And that's a mental switch that needs to change, and you have to be there to help them with that as well.
I like the idea of doing it together and being there for them. This is a great question up on the screen now. And just so they don't think that your project is poppycock or whatever, but how do leaders simplify a project without oversimplification? And it's the same part of the culture and communication you guys are changing. I'd love your thoughts on simplifying and connecting with the people. So Phil, do you want to start with that first?
Well, I think it's breaking it down, as I said before, is, why are you trying to drive an initiative in the first place? What's the motivators for that? Getting people really clear on the benefits that will come from that. And as everybody's been saying, is giving some degree of accountability and ownership to everybody for having a part to play in this. It's very hard to get people bought into something, to Vikram's point, when they are brought into it much later. The whole concept of change management, Kotter's got this 8-point change process, and it talks about all the 8 steps of driving change. And one of the early ones is building a guiding coalition, or effectively getting a group of supporters working along with you. The sooner that you can make and establish that, the more successful you're likely to be, and particularly if they're folks who are obviously influential. So I would say that, simplifying it without oversimplifying it, really just make sure that, again, people understand what you're doing, why you're driving it, where it's actually going to help the business, and ultimately how it's going to help them. And I think, to sum up, do it with people, not to them. Get them engaged early on, and help them feel as though they're part of the solution here. It's not being forced upon them without their involvement.
I think Ryan just in the audience hit upon something that I was going to bring up. It was going to sound a little bit petty or small or simple, but I think using acronyms to get people to remember things. My team, I've probably forgotten more acronyms than I've created, but my team will tell you those things are They just pop out of me, and somehow some of them stick, which is why they remember more of them than I do. But like, for example, we call ourselves Team IT. Together, everyone achieves more inspiration and transformation, right?
That's great.
It's just feeding that inspiration, transformation idea and saying, this is who we are.
That's wonderful. I like that Ken's comment sparked that in you. And what I love about the show is the comments come in as frequently. And John just posted an article about transformation. Here's another one from Frank. Everything should be as simple as possible, not simpler. Very, very cool quote by a smart young man named Einstein. But it's a opportunity to help shape and grow what we're doing. And I think that's fantastic for you guys. So how do we get leaders to think beyond their function and embrace enterprise level goals without being selfish? So Ryan, do you want to kick this one up first?
Yeah, of course. So I think, how do you get leaders to think beyond their function and embrace enterprise level goals is you got to make enterprise thinking practical and not abstract. Leaders don't really resist enterprise goals. They resist vague ones, kind of what we mentioned earlier. Make enterprise thinking tangible by trying, to real, trade-offs, speed versus control, growth versus risk, kind of what Phil was mentioning, flexibility versus standardization. Once leaders kind of understand how their local optimizations affect global outcomes or just business outcomes in general, revenue, customer trust, regulatory exposure, things of that nature, the conversation definitely changes. And it stops being philosophical and starts being operational. But I think enterprise thinking sticks when leaders see the cost of not doing it, to kind of what Phil mentioned earlier, than it is to actually do it. Once they see that transparency, they kind of, realize that it's more of an enterprise level goal, not just a, siloed functional department goal.
Especially leaning in as an IT leader across the organizational areas. So which having to support their goals and budgets along with yours. Vikram, how about you? Any thoughts on this one?
I think I go back to the notion of, I think nothing motivates anyone more than what's in it for me. And so if you can help people see the enterprise goals as a way to advance their goals while at the same time advancing the enterprise's goals, it makes it makes the adoption a lot easier. I was head of the global PMO at Carnival Corporation, and we had 7 brands of cruise lines that had all grown up independently. They all had CIOs, and they all had kind of done the same thing, right? They had the same tools that the other one had, but there was no sharing. And I was responsible for driving synergy across all of those people, so we didn't reinvent the wheel. And once we got past the sort of, hey, not invented here syndrome, and they could see that they could actually save money and do things faster by copying rather than reinventing the wheel, buy-in was so much easier.
Very true. Very true. Phil, how about you on this one?
I think we all as technologists have an inclination to take things back to technical terms, and that's not typically what the business wants to understand. They want to understand, to Vikram's point, what's in it for me or what's in it for my business unit, and how does this actually impact our organization, our enterprise in economic terms, not just the technology for technology's sake. So I think being able to talk that lingo and understand exactly how is what you're going to do. Ultimately, it's one of 3 things. How is it going to drive revenue? How's it going to reduce cost? Or how's it going to reduce risk? Those are the 3 things that, we continue to frame most delivery around. And it's often a combination of those, and really getting folks really clear on how the new technology is going to impact them in those terms will much more likely get you buy-in than just, well, I'm doing this because it's a cool tech project. And I think that is where a lot of organizations have struggled with the whole artificial intelligence adoption that we saw a lot in 2025. Is everybody's doing it because they need to be seen to be doing something in artificial intelligence, but they haven't actually measured return on investment and how is this actually going to drive the business forward or materially reduce cost or risk. It's just doing AI for AI's sake, and therefore the ROI has not, in many, many cases, actually been realised as yet. So that's it, Rob.
Beautiful. Ryan?
No, look, I think it's all, spot on, just going early to what I mentioned in the beginning. I think it's all about, enterprise isn't just about technology, but it's about business outcomes. And I kind of like to flip things around where they say IT innovation, to Phil's point, drives business strategy, but business strategy is what really drives IT innovation, right? And making sure that what you're trying to achieve from a business standpoint is how you're prioritizing your IT innovation, and how do you prioritize that kind of, creation flow. And that's, revenue generation, profit margins, expanding on your revenue growth, your client customer success and retention. And then you get into the whole risk, regulatory, resilience, compliance, and everything else. But then it's, operational efficiencies and then workplace efficiencies. And I think if you have that structure in place and understand that business strategy will be driving that, and your overall IT kind of roadmap and innovation, it's a pretty, clear and simple path forward.
So, thanks, Ron. And this is a great quote that Vishal just put into the chat. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. I do want to share a quick story because I love when you guys talk about how to make it important. When I was running global IT for a manufacturing company, I actually put a machinist together with a salesperson who explained to machinists that the part you make goes into a human body to save lives, right? And that creates a synergy of what the mission really is driving, and not just a machinist making a part. I like how you guys are spinning this to making sure that it's absolutely appropriate to the business that we run, not the technology as a business. John Erickson, long-time friend. Our job is not to take the simplest problems and break them down into the most complex forms. This speaks truth of it so far regarding clarity, simplicity, and communication as such, which is really important to have across the organization. So let's pick up on the theme of prioritization, right? Demand's always really high, and now with AI, everyone wants to deliver AI before, and my definition of AI, with some others, is applied imagination, but before we get it through to the business, that we might be a little bit overwhelmed and we have more work than people, right? How do you guys prioritize without just saying we don't have the bandwidth or being the no in the room? Do you want to start with this?
Sorry, was that to me?
Yeah, if you want to start with this.
Yeah, so this has always been a question for IT, because everybody wants more than you usually have to give. But as you said, with AI, it's just unbelievably imbalanced. Let's call it that. I think I'm not sure I have the perfect answer to that, which is why I think we would love to hear from others. But the first thing I'm starting to do is show the imbalance, this is the demand. And people often, because they only look at their little thing, right? And IT is looking at the whole portfolio, they don't realize everything that's going on. And they don't realize that, maybe this thing is more important than the other. So I think creating visibility is the first thing you have to do. And as long as you can get past the, hey, I don't care about that because it's not mine, and you get them to look at it just graphically, right, without actually getting into the nitty-gritty of what's in there, it really gets their attention. So one of the graphs that I've used recently, which has had an impact on the CFO and I think others, is I just added up all our demand trend from tickets to solutions to backlog and put it on a time chart, like an area chart. And then demand's growing 25 to 45% CAGR over 6 years. Then I looked at our resource growth, and that's 11%. Right? Whoa. And the graph shows it. Now, what to do about it, that's Phil's or Ryan's job to answer.
All right, so I'm going to throw it out to Phil to start off, and how we get demand.
Thanks for passing the baton there. Nicely set up there, by the way. So here's what I'd say. First of all, in financial services, the one thing that will generally get more attention than everything else is a regulatory issue. And that's going to be the same in any regulated industry, of course. Deadlines that come with regulations will generally have the imperative, higher than everything else. And so they will always get the attention quite rightly. Then you've got other fixed deadlines, like it could be a building move, you've got a real estate deadline, whatever it may be. Beyond that, then I think, I don't want to say everything's up for grabs, but I think that's where you then have to really look at what are the true drivers for the initiatives, as I've been saying, what's going to be the outcome. So can you put a measurable return on investment on that? And over how long will that be realized? And there's various models that you can use that will effectively demonstrate what's going to deliver the biggest impact in the shortest amount of time. And that's a key sort of agile delivery principle. There's models for calculating, and you then sequence things in that order, and that will come down to both team resources are available, and of course the cost to actually deliver on that. But I will say one thing that, and Vikram is spot on, it's very easy to focus on the change programs because ultimately that's what the business sees. What they're not thinking about is those dial tone run the business services that are just running behind the scenes. And when they can look at your technology organization, it's like, oh, haven't you got X many people? Why can't you take on more capacity? And then it's sometimes very, very helpful to say, well, let's just sort of unpack that, peel back the onion and say, well, just have a look at all of these other things that we're running behind the scenes. And that can be infrastructure and cybersecurity and compliance and the PMO and all of those things that support the change organization, but also just enable the business to keep the lights on. And people get a great appreciation for that. And sometimes they just lose sight of it. So it's that really, really making sure that there is very good clarity on the capacity to drive change, which is going to be everything that's left over after you're running the business itself, and then, prioritizing around that. So yeah, putting models in place though is generally something that's worked for me, just, trying to put some metrics behind it, but also of course acknowledging that sometimes there's just going to be a senior stakeholder who just really wants to get something done, and that will often trump things as much as a regulatory issue might as well.
Beautiful. Brian?
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit. Look, I mean, I think what Phil and Vikram are saying is spot on. And I'll just jump back to, what I mentioned a little bit earlier with the prioritization of, what's revenue generating, what's client retention, customer success, risk, regulatory compliance. When you're dealing with Sarbanes-Oxley and regulatory, you have to get these things done. And then you start looking at the workplace and operational efficiencies and things of that nature. I think, when you start looking at IT as a whole, it's buy versus build, right? What's the short-term goals? What's the long-term goals? Everyone thinks, you have X amount of people. Well, to Phil's point, they're data science, they're cybersecurity guys, they're infrastructure guys, they're EUC guys, they're software engineers. They all don't do the same thing. And once you start to break down to Vikram's point of, well, here's who we have. If we want to take on this project, it's going to take X amount of time to build this out. Do we go out and just buy a third-party software that we can kind of customize and connect on the back end with an API, or do we just build it ourselves? And that's where the kind of magic happens. But at the end of the day, it's really understanding that the leaders and the business drivers and the business, functional heads have to understand that just because they have a P&L that makes money doesn't mean they have the ability to go out and spend as much money as they want, right? You have to put the firm hat on, because from a firm perspective, you might not have the ability to go out and spend all that money. And then you might need to reallocate some of those resources to help another business unit, from an enterprise standpoint, to drive an actual outcome as well.
Yeah, I think while we have to move at a faster pace than we ever have, and we talk about the rate of change in technology, a good portfolio management practice in place and fiduciary responsibilities goes a long way. Through all this, been pun intended, but digital transformation process. This is not AI. It's the next level of digital transformation our organizations operate. But we are at times controlling and holding and impacting the purse strings and rallying the C-suite. How do you guys feel that, and I'm not going to specifically point to any C-level, right, CEO, CEO. How do you feel that most C-levels misunderstand how the modern CIOs create value?
I can start.
Okay, go Phil. Yep.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I think that it's often lost the value of what technology brings to an organization. For example, and it's almost like it should be on the balance sheet, is something like data. Really, really appreciating how important data is to an organization, combined with the technology's organization to be able to deliver that and provide that and do analytics on that so the business can actually make decisions on that. That's actually really, really important. And I think that a lot of that is often lost on other executives until they start getting that data themselves and appreciating how much it can actually help them make decisions. So that would be a starting point for that, Rob, that I think that helping look at the broader value that technology is enabling beyond just what might be seen as dial tone, keep the lights on services.
It's
right.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's to add to Phil's point, a quick fun story. I was having a conversation with the CEO about 4 weeks ago, called me on a Friday night, and him and I were just talking. He goes, when I hear CIO, I hear support. I hear laptops. I hear phones. That's all I hear from Brian. I'm like, okay, well, that's not good. And that mental door needs to be opened from that CEO perspective. And that's where the CIO has to kind of show, how do you create value through flow and not just tools and platforms? And to Phil's point, many CEOs still associate our value with system modernization, cloud, AI, cost center stuff. Like those matter, but they're not where the real value is created from that CEO kind of standpoint mindset. Value kind of comes from how do you improve how the business kind of flows, how quickly ideas become revenue, how reliable clients are served, how risk is controlled, how change actually lands outside of the company and internally as well. But modern CIOs really create value by designing and operating those systems, not just the technology that's underneath them. And technology enables value, but I think the execution is what creates it. And that's where it matters most.
Absolutely. It's all about execution. Vikram?
Well, I think I take it as a great compliment that all C-level people just expect the CIO to be able to deliver anything. I mean, frankly, that's
true.
Why do they come to us, right? Because it's everything from network to phones to desktops but they're also talking to you about AI at the other end and how to enable it and everything. And I think I would take it as a sign that, frankly, there's nobody else they can go to in the organization that will be able to connect the dots, point out the obstacles or potential obstacles, and help them figure out whether whatever they're trying to get done is going to get done or unrealistic to get done or maybe not get done right now. And I think that at Amneal, and I have to credit our CFO for having really helped me do this, is we've reframed major efforts, whether it's ERP transformation or data or AI, as being business initiatives. They're not IT projects. And I know everyone says that, but it's easy to forget, and people forget every day. And you have to remind them why they're business projects. And I think our role is education, which is frankly something I probably didn't pay enough attention to early enough in my career. But educating people about the basics of data, the basics of how AI works, something we don't put a lot of time into. But once they understand that, then they start to understand it's not magic, looks like magic, and I can do it too.
So I not only do I love that, I'm curious, and we're running out of time, so I'm going to leave this tickler for you guys, and maybe we'll pick this up at the end of the year. But right now, people are looking at AI as a thing, right? Something that we have to look at with this curiosity. There's adoption questions, there's governance questions, compliance, right? But maybe if we look at the transformations we're going through at the end of the year, it's not going to be a thing anymore. It's going to be treated no different than we treat electricity, telephony, email, right? And that shift in how we interact with our audience might be different. So before I get to my last question, I'm going to ask you guys, let's pick this up again at the end of the year and try to look at some of these operational, the way we operate now versus how we operate then. And I'm going to trick you all to doing this again because this makes me happy having you here. But I'm going to throw one more question at you guys, just a real quick answer, because I want to leave people with a good takeaway. And you've delivered so much knowledge today. So if you had a direct report or someone else that you didn't know out of your organization, a high potential deputy CIO, right? The shift between contributing to an area versus contributing to the entire organization, enterprise. So if there's a high potential deputy CIO, what would you tell them to start doing versus stop doing in their day-to-days to move to that CIO level on as an enterprise agent for change? So Vikram, you want to take a stab at this unplanned question I threw at you guys?
Yeah, no. I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's fresh in my mind because developing talent is near and dear to everyone's heart. I think there's always this notion of people being self-aware and understanding what they know and what they don't know. And the most dangerous thing in the world is people who don't know what they don't know, right? Because that stops the learning. It stops them being able to take advantage of other people who do know more than they do. So humility, self-awareness, and I think this being aware of knowing what you don't know is probably the number one thing I would say people need to remember as they grow in their careers.
I love the humility part. It's really important, and it's a skill that needs to be adopted, not taken for granted. Phil, how about you?
I would say literally take off your IT hat and go spend more time with the business. Go and take a month away from technology and really understand how your organization drives change, makes money, whatever it's in business for, and understand if you've got clients, what's the full client journey? How do they get engaged with you? How do they find your firm? How do they get engaged with your firm? How do they contribute to your firm's success? And how do you actually enable and continue to work with them? Following that full journey end to end is so important, because that's essentially why you're in business. And there's a ton of support processes behind the scenes that enable that. And a few people who are engaging with your clients, yes, get to understand what they do, but all of those back end processes as well. I was in a meeting just last week and somebody said, "You've been here for a little bit over a year now. Do you understand our business?" I was like, not even close. That's I know more than I did a year ago, but I've still got a lot to learn. And I think just, making that effort to really get out and spend time understanding how your entire organization works and encouraging your staff to do the same thing will only make them better. Those who've forever spent their entire career in technology and technology sort of facing roles are at a significant disadvantage, frankly, to those who've actually had the fortune of actually spending a lot more time with the business.
Beautiful. Ryan?
Look, I think, when you have to manage people and it's all about transparency and openness and really showing empathy. But the one thing that I like to kind of show a lot of the people is the Eisenhower matrix, right? Which is time management, which is, what do you need to focus on? What can you delegate? What's more important? Like to Phil's point, right? Like, go sit with the business, because that's what drives our company. Don't worry about, making sure that the code is ready to push out on a Friday night, right? 80% of your time should be sitting with the business, understanding how they deliver value to the customer, to the business in general, and how is revenue generated. Because if you understand that, that's where the real ideas come from. And that's kind of what I go back to, where business strategy kind of drives IT innovation. That's where the most critical, smartest, brightest minds are really going to come up with great ideas, by sitting with the business, understanding the end-to-end kind of workflow. And I kind of wrote an article a few weeks ago, and I posted it on LinkedIn about the CIO changing from a operational to a transformational owner. And this is one of those guides in there, right? Is how do you get closer to the business? How do you create that alignment with the business? How do you deliver value to the business? Because at the end of the day, that's what you're there for, right? If you can't provide or define value to the business, then the business doesn't have that respect. And to change the CIO view is perception is reality, and driving that business value truly matters.
So listen, I love everything you guys said, and the CIO role is no longer about running IT and running about outcomes, and we touched on a lot of that today. I appreciate you both tremendously. I think we all think it was a great session. A lot of that's coming right now, and I really look forward to this one. So, guys, let's just real quick. Ryan, thank you. If people want to follow you, LinkedIn or anything else?
LinkedIn is great. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'm starting to post a lot of fun articles about, revenue catalysts and CIOs and the journey ahead for all of us technology people. So it's going to be a fun ride.
Phil, how about you?
Same. LinkedIn, definitely the best way to get a hold of me. And Ryan, by the way, I read one of your articles yesterday. It was excellent.
Excellent. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Any way to how do people reach out to you? LinkedIn as well?
LinkedIn is fine. Although I have to admit, I don't keep up with it as much as I should, but you'll get me.
Well, I'll give you a reason to come back. And I want to thank everybody for the time today, participating. Special bonus for anyone who could figure out the special words that each one of us dropped today to make this a little bit more fun. And we tried to work with our conversation. So, guys, that was a lot of fun. I appreciate the prep of that. And we all did a pretty good job not bursting out laughing. But it was a great conversation, great topic, great information. Thank you all for being part of this. Thank you, everybody, for watching and continuing to listen and support Lean Digital Era. And let's see if we can't get you guys back at the end of this year. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining Leading in the Digital Era, presented by the Institute for Digital Transformation and hosted by Robert Field. Look for new episodes coming to a LinkedIn live session at noon on the second Tuesday of every month. Can't join Robert for the live session? You can catch the replay anytime on our YouTube channel.